So welcome all the eminent members of sharEvery and all the seekers as well. Today we are going to witness very important session. Chaturani ma'am, the stage is yours to introduce Kiana ma'am.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Chatrani and I am trying more today's session. I am so pleased to be with you and today and to have chance to introduce our guest speaker, KIANA JOHNSON. She is a consultant and certified coach that empowers veterans, executives, and teams and individuals to reach their leadership potential. Over the past 16 years, she worked with the various Fortune 500 companies in healthcare, banking, hospitality, and technology. As a coach, she implemented chain enablement approaches that resulted in the reduction of waste, improved transparency, and execute levels. Besides that, she is certified Kanban professional, certified agile leadership. She won Change Enablement Award in 2021. Finally, she also just fascinating person and we all love for a treat today. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Kiana Johnson, today's guest speaker. Coach Gautam Pal, over to you.
Thank you very much for your very insightful brief about Kiara ma'am. And thank you very much all the panelists who have joined and all the members who are eagerly waiting for this particular session. Now, Kiara ma'am, stage is yours and I'm really interested to listen from you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Please go ahead.
I'm so happy to be here and eager to share some of my knowledge with you and what I've been learning on my Kanban journey. So before I dig into Kanban, I like to start with a little bit of the history of Kanban because I found it very interesting. So Kanban originated in Japan in the 1940s by an industrial engineer and businessman by the name of Taiichi Ohno. Taiichi Ohno worked at the Toyota automotive plant. And what he has seen when working at the plant was stockpiling of product, incomplete product moving to stages before it was done. And that resulted in a loss of revenue and inefficient processes. So Taiichi Ohno decided to create a simple Kanban system that allowed them to manage, plan, and organize their work. And by creating this simple Kanban system, Taiichi Ohno was able to increase revenue, reduce waste, and improve their processes. Now, the backbone of the Toyota product system is just-in-time manufacturing, or some of you have probably heard lean manufacturing. And the two pillars behind lean manufacturing are continuous improvement and respect for people. Now, as we go through my lecture about Kanban, think about the respect for people and the continuous improvement, because you'll start to hear that resonate as I start to dig into what are the Kanban principles, practices, and values. And then, of course, I want to share my personal experience with Kanban. So let's start with what is Kanban? Kanban is a change management approach that allows you to plan and organize your work. You can manage the flow of your work by making your work visible, exposing waste, and being able to respond to business changes. And you're actually creating a pull system versus a push system. And I'll get into that a little bit more, what that means, pull versus push system, when we start to talk about the practices. So Kanban can be used to evolve a system by inspecting and adapting your system. And organizations use Kanban to work more efficiently, get the team to be more collaborative and communicate more. And we'll talk through some examples in the lecture later on. Today, in different companies, Kanban is used. I've worked at several different companies where I've had to implement Kanban at the team and even at the senior executive level. And so with that being said, Kanban does allow you to take small improvement steps at your own pace. And that is key. Now, why do I say that? I say that because, as you know, change can sometimes be frustrating. And you can sometimes meet resistance with change. And I believe, that's from a fear of uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen. If you've been doing something for a long period of time, a certain way, and then change is introduced and there's not much communication, well, you may have a fear of, how does this impact me? Am I going to lose my role? Do I know where I fit in this new structure? Well, Kanban allows us to be able to take small steps to reduce that fear and bring transparency to not just the team members, employees, and middle managers, but executives as well. So let's talk about some principles, and I'll tie all this in for you. There are two types of principles in Kanban. There's the change management principle, which we'll dig into, and then there's a service-oriented principle. Let's talk about the change management principle. And I want to come back to what I just talked about of resistance to not knowing how your role, how your life will be impacted by a change. So Kanban principles acknowledges this. We understand that, there's uncertainty in change. You don't know what the future may bring. So with the first change management principle, is start with what you know. You don't have to change all your processes at once. You make small improvement changes over time. And then you reflect and adjust to see, well, how did this work for us? That's the first principle. Start with what you know. Imagine you wanted to cycle 100 miles. You wouldn't go out and do it the next day. You would actually take small steps to work towards your goal of wanting to cycle 100 miles. So what does that mean? Each time you cycle, you would reflect and adjust. You would see how that felt. How did I do? What do I need to change as far as my cycling habits, my eating habits, my drinking habits, and water and staying hydrated? Those are all things that you will be reflecting on to make small improvements to reach that goal of 100 miles. Which I currently do, because I'm looking at that goal and I'm trying to make sure I'm reflecting and making those small improvements to reach my goal of cycling 100 miles. So I wanted to share that with you. It's something that resonates with not just starting with what you know, but taking small steps to make improvements. The next principle is agree to pursue incremental and evolutionary change. Now, again, this could be difficult, right? Because resistance to change of not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing how your role or your family is going to be impacted. Those are all valid concerns when change efforts are occurring. But the cool thing about Kanban is it encourages you to take slow improvement steps and have transparency at the executive level and the team level. So there's no gaps in communication, no silos where you're not understanding what's going to happen here and how are you going to be impacted. Respect for people, respect for current roles, respect for responsibilities, it's job titles in life. It's a good guide when implementing change. Respecting other people's viewpoints, ensuring everyone is heard is one key to ensuring that, we have a successful change effort. The last principle that I want to talk about under the change management is leadership. So what does that mean? Encouraging acts of leadership at all levels. Kanban encourages you to have a growth mindset, continuous improvement, growing at all levels. And later in my lecture here, I'll talk a little bit about what leaders need to think about when we talk about, growth mindset, encouraging acts of leadership at all levels. Good leadership creates conditions in which self-organization thrives. Good leadership also challenges team members. But as change agents, we must be ready to be challenged and to also challenge others, because that is a key to growth. Being able to be challenged and having that support to know that you're growing as you're being challenged. So those are the 3 change management principles. So let's talk about the service-oriented principles. And we look at an organization as an ecosystem of interdependent services. So Kanban acknowledges this. So we focus on the customer, right? Understanding the customer needs and expectations. We don't manage people. We manage the work and let people self-organize, right? So it's fostering self-accountability, self-ownership. And we evolve our policies. Later in this lecture, I'll talk about explicit policies so you can gather an idea of what that means. But we reflect on our policies based on our iterations to see how did we deliver to the customer? What can we learn from delivering from the customer? And what do we need to evolve in our policies to make sure we're continuously being efficient in our delivery to the customer? Now, before I move on to our values, I would be very interested to know how many of you sort of resonated with the change management and service-oriented principles. And then as we go into the values, I'd like you to think about which of these values you use on a day-to-day basis or even in your life. And you can share in the chat, and I'll go ahead and get started on our values. So the first value is understanding. And that's starting with what you know, right? Understanding that people have different ways of interpreting information. So respecting that, making sure that people are heard, understanding their viewpoints. That's all key, right? So being able to foster that positive environment, secure environment. You want to make sure that, when change is started, from the top down, that you are aligned, you understand what the senior leaderships are trying to do. Because too often when change efforts occur from the top down, they seem to get lost in communication. And when it comes down to the team level, you don't really understand what are we doing? What's the goal? What's the missions here? What's the end result that we're trying to get to as a whole organization? So sometimes that message can get lost from when it's being communicated from top down. Next is agreement. And you'll see some similarities here, how these values sort of interrelate to each other. Agreement means having the same understanding of how we're moving towards the goals. If you've been on a team, you understand, you're talking to the team, you're trying to understand, well, what do we need to do in order to get this work complete? And as a team, how do we want to approach this work? So you're collaborating with the team and making sure you're all aligned and moving together as one cohesive team. Respect in a matter of appreciation for people, for your team members. And I mentioned above, respect for current roles, responsibilities, and titles, and respect for someone's value system. We want to build an environment that is secure for the team to grow. So that means hearing different viewpoints and understanding where people are coming from. So I ask, will it increase your chances of success by implying that people are doing the worst job? Or will it increase your chances of success by implying that people are doing the best job they can with the information given? So we want to build that type of environment where transparency is there and alignment and agreement is there. And the team has the capability to communicate with each other. So Kanban is a well-functioning approach. It's adaptable, and you can expect and make changes over time. Now it does, reduce the fear of change and, the resistance, because you start with what you know. There's no changing of your roles and your existing processes all at once. So you have the capability to start to embrace and gather understanding of what this is going to mean when we want to make the change. And remember, take small steps at a time to improve. You don't want to bite off the whole apple. You want to take small steps and reflect and adjust. Now, the next value is flow. And in Lean, the customer focus aligns with managing the flow. Flow provides a sense of purpose, of knowing why the customer is doing this or asking for this request. It also brings alignment between the team and the customer's goals. Again, you start to get a sense of, with that service-oriented principle that, we want to be focused on the customer. We want to make sure we're supporting and giving the customer what they need and meeting those expectations. So flow also gives a sense of functioning smoothly, increasing predictability over time. And when I say increasing predictability, that's in predictability of delivering the work. So while you make your workflow transparent, you're able to see what blockers, what bottlenecks may start to prevent you from delivering to that customer on a on a due date, And another thing is addressing impediments, which we'll talk about later in this lecture as well. The next value is transparency. And transparency aligns with a few of the practices that we'll discuss later. So transparency means making your workflow and work items visible at any given time, making sure your policy constraints that guide you are available for the team to understand, to ask questions, to think about, well, how is this going to impact our overall performance? What do we need to think about when we create these policies? And lastly, making visible the impact of the customer-focused measurements. Next is balance. Now, balance can be thought of as two different ways. The first way is thinking different viewpoints, different aspects from team members or individuals, considering those things, right? Embracing that, being open to hear what other team members bring to the table. Because everybody's viewpoint is going to be different, but they may bring something special to the table as well as you're sitting there, you're brainstorming or solutioning about how we're going to do things. Now, balance can also align with limiting work in progress. So limiting work in progress can mean shorter lead times, delivering a product or service to the customer sooner, knowledge sharing, and growing team members into leaders. Now, balance equals flow from a work items perspective and supply and demand imbalance from a team member's perspective. So I like to show that in a visual. Once we get to later down in the practices, I have a visual where you can actually be able to see what I'm discussing here. And our final value is collaboration. And collaboration does align with two of the core practices, and you'll hear that down in my lecture. But collaboration means agreement from the team and the customer, aligning with the customer's goals by having conversations, by being able to ask questions, having the stakeholders and the subject matter experts in there giving you a vision of what they want to achieve. That's the collaboration part. That's being able to be aligned on what is expected and have an agreement on that when you come out of those sessions. Collaboration creates the expectation that we need to look beyond our team boundaries in addressing impediments in flow. Now that I've discussed the values and the principles, let's get into the core practices. And I do have just a visual to talk through while I am going over the practices. Now that we've discussed the values, I'm going to the core practices of Kanban. And the principles, the values, and the practices lay the foundation for Kanban. So, and I just like you to also keep in mind when I'm discussing these practices, you'll start to see how it aligns to the values. And when I was discussing the values, which are tying in how they relate to the change management principles and how some of them also are going to relate to the core practices. So let's get started. The first practice, visualizing your flow. So what does that mean? That means taking your work items, having your work items. So imagine this being tasks and then listing out the columns, and these columns align with what you do on a day-to-day basis. So visualizing your work, and your work will flow through various stages in the process from left to right. Each swim lane represents a step. In this board or in this workflow, I want you to take away that it's vital that you highlight blockers and dependencies, because blockers and dependencies can impact your flow, can impact your delivery to the customer, can impact your efficiency. So it's key when you have blockers and dependencies, as a team, you discuss, well, what do we need to do in order to resolve this blocker? If we have a dependency, who do we need to talk to ensure that they are aligned with our timeline and we understand when they can get this work done so we can remove our dependency? The second practice is work in progress, WIP limits. You'll see a WIP limit of 3 here. WIP limit creates a push system to a pull system. So what does that mean? When work becomes available in this lane here, in this column, you pull the work in. It allows you to manage the amount of work you're working on at a time. So you can actually see the work flow from start to finish. So if you have too much WIP, you can wind up impacting the quality of the work. You could come out with incomplete work. You can increase waste, and you can wind up multitasking, and you can increase cost because you're not focused on getting the pieces of work done. You're multitasking on several items. So in my experience in working with teams, depending on my team size, we experiment with WIPs. And I tell my team, I say, I don't want anything too constraining for you, because it's not, this change management system is not to constrain you. WIP limits shouldn't constrain you, but you don't want too much WIP where you're pulling in 8 items and you know that you're only able to work on 2 items at a time. So work is just sitting there. The third practice is managing the flow, which is a key aspect between the relationship with the consumer of the service and the customers. Managing the flow can result in improved lead times, minimizing risk, and increase efficiency in the workflow. And it can improve the delivery times, which goes hand in hand with the lead times, because the lead time is from start to the time it hits the customer's hand. And it can improve quality. Now think about the WIP limits, managing your amount of work that's in your columns to be able to see that work move and make sure you are testing it as needed and not feeling rushed to keep working on all the items you pulled in. So it allows you to manage that so you can see the progress. And so managing that flow is definitely key when we talk about meeting customers' expectations, because we want to make sure that, we are thinking about quality and thinking about the time it takes to deliver. The next practice is explicit policies. So policies can be thought of as guidelines, rules that the team comes up with. The team will sit down and they'll talk about, what type of policies do we need on each individual column. So for example, in the to-do, let's take the to-do. Before they pull work in, a team could come up with a policy that says, let's make sure we've identified any teams that are dependent upon that work, or we have a dependency on. Let's make sure we understand what needs to be done to the, it doesn't have to be 100%, but let's make sure we feel confident that we know what needs to be done before we say, okay, let's pull that work into doing or in progress. Those can be an example of a policy, and a team would come up with those policies together. Because next I want to discuss a Kanban board. And this is what I was showing to you was a Kanban board. This is the board, and the board, team members can have electronic boards or they can have physical boards. And this is a visualization tool. It allows you to visualize the work and it allows you to manage your work. And that's where the predictability over time comes into place, because you're visualizing and looking at your work. You're having those feedback loops where you're consistently talking about how the work is going using this board. And I'll use this example here. And then in your planning, release, and commitment meetings, you're talking about the work that's in the to-do state, and what does that look like to get this to a done state or to get this in the customer's hand. So you have this swim lane to call out work that is critical that you need to prioritize above this work. All right, so what companies are using Kanban? And so there are a few companies that may be familiar to you that are using Kanban. And I just wanted to share some of these companies with you. How many of you are familiar with these companies? So these companies are using Kanban to improve their communication, collaboration, and work effectively as a team. Take, for instance, Toyota, where Kanban was founded. They actually use Kanban to help them coordinate their work and take their work from start to completion. They also use Kanban to increase their efficiency and focus on creativity, because again, it's all about experimentation. Pixar uses their Kanban boards more to reflect what they do. So they may have a task like concept art or model, and then their departments are broken down into swim lanes on the board, and each card work can be aligned to those swim lanes. So it really, you can start to see the flexibility within Kanban when you get together with your team and you look at, well, what do we do and how does this board look? How will this board look for us? You can really expand upon it. And the last company I'll look at is Apple, which they use Kanban to help manage the workflow and create an environment where they collaborate to achieve their goals. So I think it's really cool and interesting what you can do with Kanban when you start to work together as a team to imagine, how does this look for us? And I thought this was interesting, and I just want to share this with you, because shared leadership says that a manager should guide the team in achieving a common goal. So they really should remove themselves from the authoritative figure, right? And start to be a part of the team. And not have to, and you shouldn't have to get approval from a manager on small tasks. So the manager is more like a cheerleader for the team. They're the ones that are radiating information and making the vision transparent and communicating the vision. They're no longer telling you what to do. I thought this was so cool, because the leaders, should be focused on empowering the team members, giving them the information that they need to be able to make the right decisions, versus telling them and keeping the information for themselves and directing them on what to do. Kanban has significant positive effects on leaders and teams in success and achievement. You've learned how Kanban is a change management approach that has values, principles, and practices that lay the foundation of Kanban. And I've talked about how Kanban can be used at the team level and in your personal life. I've also discussed how some companies are using Kanban to communicate, collaborate, and improve their team's efficiency of working together to make sure they're achieving a common goal. And I've also talked about what leaders should think about. when they talk about, wanting to make a change effort that involves agile, having agility, working as a team. And now, lastly, I've shared my personal experience of how I use Kanban on a day-to-day basis and what it looks like for me. So I ask you, how could you use Kanban? And remember, when working with Kanban, keep it simple. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. It was one of a kind discourse I have ever heard, right? I'm telling you that this kind of thing I never heard before, and this is the first time. And firstly, when you started, I thought of that it was a more corporate approach, right? But as the session progresses, I got to know that, oh my God, it is not a corporate approach. It should be an individual approach as well. So thank you very much, ma'am, for such great discourse. In this prospect, in sharEvery discourses, we have a reviewer that is Joyful Jagdish, right? Now, Jagdish sir, stage is yours. Please.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity. At the outset, I thoroughly enjoyed your lecture on Kanban. As rightly said by Gautam Pal, I also thought it's only for corporates. Why is it being told to all of us? With due respect, we have teachers, trainers, and coaches. But I think it is very, very appropriate. And you really went in depth. I know Kanban, after hearing from you, it does not, it needs more time, which I could see from as you're going through that you want to give that information to all of us. The process, I think you went little fast, in my opinion, so that people should get more. And you covered the values, principles, practices, and you also said Kanban means manage, plan, organize. There are two types of principles: change management principle, service-oriented principles, and you really went on to each values: understanding, incredible, respect, flow, transparency, customer goals, balance, collections. Wonderful job done. You also had a laughter here and there so that it does not become monotonous. With due respect, when you're online, we love to sleep. It is on, but we don't know whether are we hearing or not. But you gave that now and then here and there, the few laughs from your side was very, very nice. And also you used, can you say in your chat box so that we are with you? That's what a good thing. And also you also showed the Kanban board and your board in person. Wonderful job done. As I always believe, everything good can be made better by having one or two suggestions, if it is okay with you. If I was in your position, what I would have done is maybe I would have said Kanban requires more time. So we'll have two parts, part one, part two, so that people get benefit, number one. Number two, as we all knowing that SGF has got a global presence, some people may not be able to grasp if we go faster because of our accents. It varies from place to place. With due respect, you are from US and we are from other countries also. They might not be able to connect with the words what we use. One or two slides would have been much better in my opinion. Even though you had a slide, maybe one or two with these are the core values or principles. Like that, one or two would have been much, much better. And the third and the final one is that your Kanban board and your board, it was very good to see it. With the due respect, I can't make out what was there, the content, even though you read it about it. Maybe it was little bigger fonts so that it's easier for us. Otherwise, I thoroughly enjoyed your session. Thank you so much for giving your valuable thoughts to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Coach Joyful Jagdish sir, for such pertinent reflection. I can say that it's very good